The air was thick with the tantalizing aroma of freshly baked goods, blending seamlessly with the scent of car exhaust and the faint metallic tang of the city. Lucas adjusted the lid of the makeshift stall he had set up outside the towering glass behemoth of Corvin Enterprises. For the past 15 years, the humble cart had been his home away from home, a source of income and a testament to resilience. Every day, executives in tailored suits breezed past him, noses buried in their phones, eyes glossing over the vendor in the same spot with his wooden sign, scrawled in uneven letters, "Homemade cakes, a bite of happiness." Lucas had long stopped wondering what it was like inside that skyscraper. To him it was a different world, a realm of luxury he could never fathom. His world consisted of flour, sugar, and his late grandmother's secret recipes. It was her voice that echoed in his mind every morning, as he stirred batter and folded delicate flower petals into the dough. "Chrysanthemums for strength, Lucas," she had said. "Every bite should mean something." The cakes sold well enough to keep him afloat, but the flowers, his signature, remained his calling card. A few regular customers marveled at the delicate chrysanthemum petals woven into his creations. Though most dismissed it as an odd quirk, he didn't mind. Baking was his solace, his connection to a past that felt like a puzzle missing half its pieces. That day seemed no different from any other. Executives swarmed past in waves, their chatter a hum of mergers and deadlines. Lucas wiped his hands on his apron as a black car purred to a stop by the curb. The tinted window rolled down just enough for a manicured hand to appear, holding a crisp bill. "One of those, please," came the voice, a woman's, smooth and commanding. He quickly packaged one of his cakes, its golden top dusted with powdered sugar, and handed it to the driver. The car sped off, and Lucas returned to his task, unaware that the woman in the car, sipping a latte in the back seat, would find his cake far more intriguing than she could have imagined. Amelia Corvin sat in the plush leather interior of her car, scrolling through the latest market reports. The sweetness of the cake cut through the bitterness of her coffee, its flavor stopping her mid-scroll. Something stirred in her chest, a feeling both warm and unfamiliar. She paused, raising the cake to her lips again. There was a subtle floral note, chrysanthemums. Her heart skipped. The taste transported her to a different time and place, where a tiny kitchen hummed with life. The voice of her late mother filled her ears. "Chrysanthemums mean strength, my darling. You'll need that to build your empire." Amelia's grip tightened on the box. She opened it slowly, almost reverently, and there they were, petals baked into the cake. Her chest constricted. It wasn't just the flavor that tugged at her memories. It was the way the petals were folded, the method so distinct it could only have come from one person. Her mind raced back to a time she had tried to forget, the desperate years of her 20s, when her dreams of business clashed with an unexpected pregnancy, the baby boy she had given up. She had spent years trying to find him, but the trail had gone cold. The thought was too absurd to entertain, and yet, as she looked at the cake, she couldn't shake the possibility. "Stop the car," she commanded, her voice trembling slightly. Her secretary, James, turned from the passenger seat with a "Turn around." "Find the boy selling these cakes," she said, her tone sharper now. James didn't hesitate. The driver made a U-turn, weaving through traffic, and moments later, they were parked by the curb. But the stall was empty. The wooden sign swayed gently in the breeze, its message a haunting echo, a bite of happiness. Lucas didn't usually pack up early, but that day, something had felt off. A strange heaviness sat in his chest, a restlessness he couldn't shake. The city was alive around him, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He walked aimlessly, his cart rumbling along the uneven pavement, until he reached the park where he often sat to watch the world go by. The chrysanthemums in his cakes weren't just a gimmick. They were a tribute. His grandmother had been the only family he'd known, and when she passed, the flowers became his way of keeping her close. But there was always a lingering question in his heart, a void he could never fill. Who were his parents? Why had they abandoned him? He pushed the thoughts aside as he sat under a tree, nibbling on a leftover slice. The city skyline loomed in the distance, the Corvin building piercing the clouds. Amelia stepped out of the car, an unfamiliar unease tightening her throat. It was unlike her to feel anything but control, but here she was, standing on the sidewalk, scanning the crowd like a lost tourist. "Excuse me," she said to a woman passing by. The young man with the cake cart. Do you know where he went? The woman shrugged. Probably the park. He goes there sometimes. Amelia didn't wait for more. She motioned for James to follow and strode toward the park, her heels clicking against the pavement. As they neared the greenery, she spotted him, a young man in a weathered apron sitting beneath a tree, his cart parked beside him. He was thin but strong, his face framed by unruly dark hair. Her heart thundered. Could it really be? "Excuse me," she called, her voice faltering. Lucas looked up, startled. "Yes?" he replied, standing and brushing crumbs from his hands. Amelia hesitated, unsure how to begin. She had faced hostile boardrooms and ruthless competitors, yet now, confronted with this young man, she felt small. "The cakes? You bake them?" Lucas nodded, his brow furrowed. "I do. Is something wrong?" "No," she said quickly. "They're remarkable. The petals. Where did you learn that?" "My grandmother," he said, his voice softening. "She raised me, said it was our family tradition." The words hit Amelia like a tidal wave. Her knees threatened to buckle, but she steadied herself. Family tradition. It was a thread she had thought severed forever. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did she ever tell you about your parents?" Lucas froze. The question was like a key turning in a locked door. "No," he admitted. "She said they couldn't take care of me, that's all." Amelia's vision blurred as tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in decades began to well. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo, a baby wrapped in a hand-knit blanket, his eyes wide with wonder. "Does this look familiar?" she asked, her voice breaking. Lucas stared at the photo, his breath catching. The blanket, it was identical to the one his grandmother had kept in a box under her bed. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a mixture of fear and hope. "I think—" Amelia began, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, she found the courage. "I think I'm your mother." The world seemed to tilt as Lucas tried to process the revelation. The woman before him, poised and immaculate, was nothing like he'd imagined his mother to be. Yet the resemblance was there, in the curve of her jaw, the intensity of her gaze. The moment stretched, fragile and electric, as they stood frozen in the park, the bustling city fading into the background. Neither knew what to say, but both understood that their lives had just irrevocably changed. Lucas's mind whirled as he stared at the photo. The image was undeniably familiar, yet his heart resisted the implication. His hands trembled as he returned it to Amelia. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. Amelia took a deep breath, fighting to compose herself. "I know it doesn't, but I think it's the truth. I gave birth to a boy 23 years ago. I had to give him up, because I thought it was the only way to give him a chance." Lucas's gaze darkened. "You thought abandoning him was the best chance?" The bitterness in his voice was uncharacteristic, but the words escaped before he could rein them in. Amelia flinched as though struck. She deserved his anger. She knew that, but hearing it aloud was a fresh wound. "I was young," she said softly. "You have no idea how much I regretted it, how I've searched for you." "Then why now?" Lucas challenged. "You're only here because of the cake. If not for that, I'd still be outside your building, selling happiness to people too busy to notice." The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken emotions. Amelia took a step closer, her presence commanding even in this vulnerable moment. "You're right. If not for the cake, I wouldn't have found you. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't have kept trying." Her words hung in the air, earnest and raw. Lucas wanted to believe her, but the walls he'd built over the years wouldn't crumble so easily. "Look," he said, his voice quieter, "I've lived my whole life without you. I don't need answers now." He began to gather his things, his movements quick and defensive. "Let's just leave it at that." Amelia's chest tightened. She couldn't let him walk away, not when she had finally found him. "Wait," she called out, her voice firm. "You don't owe me anything, Lucas, but I owe you the truth." Lucas froze, his back to her. "The truth," he repeated, his tone skeptical. "Yes," she said, stepping closer. "The truth about why I had to let you go. The truth about who you are." He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "Who I am. I know who I am. I'm a cake vendor who barely makes rent every month. I'm not one of you." He gestured toward the Corvan building in the distance. Amelia's lips parted, but no words came. How could she explain to him that he was more than what he thought without making it sound like an excuse? "Please," she finally said. "Give me a chance to explain." Lucas hesitated. The part of him that had longed for answers, for any scrap of information about his origins, wrestled with the part that wanted to protect himself from disappointment. "Fine," he said after a long pause, "but I'm not promising anything." They sat at a nearby cafe, an awkward silence stretching between them as Amelia fidgeted with the hem of her sleeve. She wasn't used to feeling uncertain, but this moment demanded delicacy. "I was 23 when I had you," she began, her voice low. "I had just started Corvin Enterprises. It was nothing back then, just an idea and a handful of employees working out of a rented office. I was ambitious, driven, but also reckless." Lucas studied her, his expression unreadable. "I fell in love," she continued, "or at least I thought I did. He was charming, passionate, but not the kind of man you build a life with. When I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared." Her voice broke slightly, but she pushed on. "I was terrified. My family disowned me for refusing to marry someone respectable. I had no one, no money, and no time." Lucas leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. "So, you decided to give me up?" Amelia nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. "I didn't want you to grow up in chaos. I wanted you to have stability, love, things I couldn't give you. I thought I was doing the right thing." Lucas stared at the table, his jaw tight. "You don't know what it's like to grow up wondering why you weren't wanted." Her heart shattered at his words. "I wanted you," she whispered fiercely. "I never stopped wanting you. I searched for you for years, but the adoption records were sealed. I even hired private investigators, but there was nothing. It was like you disappeared." Lucas looked up, his eyes glinting with unshed tears. "And now that you've found me, what? You think we can just pick up where we left off?" Amelia shook her head. "No, I don't expect that. I just want to know you, to make up for lost time if you'll let me." He didn't respond, his thoughts a tangled web of anger, curiosity, and longing. Over the next hour, Amelia told him everything she could remember. The struggles, the regrets, the moments she had clung to hope. Lucas listened silently, his emotions roiling beneath the surface. When she finally finished, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. "This is for you," she said, sliding it across the table. "What is it?" he asked, eyeing it warily. "A letter," she said. "I wrote it for you the day I signed the papers. I didn't know if you'd ever read it, but I kept it all these years." Lucas hesitated before picking up the envelope. The paper was worn, the edges soft from years of handling. Slowly he opened it and began to read. The words were raw, filled with love, regret, and hope. By the time he finished, his hands were shaking. He folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope, his eyes meeting hers. For the first time, he saw not a powerful CEO but a mother, a flawed, desperate human mother. "I don't know what to do with this," he admitted, his voice thick. "You don't have to decide now," Amelia said gently. "Take all the time you need." As Lucas walked home that evening, the letter clutched tightly in his hand, he felt a strange mix of emotions. He had spent his life defining himself by what he didn't have, a family, a history, but now those missing pieces were being offered to him. Did he even want them? Amelia, meanwhile, returned to her office, her thoughts consumed by the young man she had just met. She had spent decades building an empire, but none of it mattered if she couldn't bridge the chasm between her and her son. That night she made a decision. If Lucas wouldn't come to her world, she would step into his. The next morning, Lucas arrived at his stall to find Amelia standing there, dressed in a simple blouse and jeans. She looked entirely out of place, but her expression was determined. "What are you doing here?" he asked, bewildered. "I want to understand your life," she said simply. "If you'll let me." Lucas hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, but don't expect it to be glamorous." Amelia spent the day shadowing him, watching as he greeted customers with genuine warmth and handled each transaction with care. She saw the way people lit up when they tasted his cakes, how he remembered their names and preferences. By the end of the day, her feet ached. Her hair was windswept and her makeup had long since faded, but she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a sense of connection. "Lucas," she said as they packed up the stall, "you have a gift. These cakes aren't just food, they're an experience. Have you ever thought about expanding?" He gave her a wry smile. "I'm barely making rent. Expanding isn't exactly an option." Amelia's mind raced. "What if I helped? We could partner. Bring your cakes to more people. You'd still have control, but I'd handle the logistics. Lucas stared at her, torn between skepticism and intrigue. You'd do that for me? I'd do anything for you, she said softly. That night Lucas lay awake, the letter and Amelia's offer weighing heavily on his mind. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a different future, one where he wasn't just surviving, but thriving. And as the first rays of dawn broke through his window, he made his decision. The morning air was crisp as Lucas pushed his cart toward his usual spot outside Corvin Enterprises. Yet, something felt different. The events of the previous day replayed in his mind, the revelations, the awkward silences, and Amelia's unexpected offer. It was almost too much to process. He had spent years avoiding thoughts of his parents, convincing himself he didn't need them. But now one was standing in front of him, offering not just answers, but a way out of the life he'd known. As he set up his stall, the familiar rhythm of arranging cakes on the counter brought a measure of calm. The early crowd began to trickle past, a mix of bleary-eyed office workers and bustling executives. Lucas greeted them with his usual warmth, though his thoughts remained elsewhere. "Morning, Lucas," came a familiar voice. Mrs. Green, one of his regulars, smiled as she approached. "The usual, please." "Of course," Lucas said, reaching for a neatly wrapped cake. "One chrysanthemum cake for the best customer in the city." Mrs. Green chuckled as she handed over the money. "You're always so kind. Keep it up, young man. You're going places." Her words lingered as she walked away. Going places. The phrase felt heavier than usual. Was he really going anywhere? Or was he too afraid to take a leap? The sound of heels clicking against the pavement pulled Lucas from his thoughts. He looked up to see Amelia approaching, her attire far more casual than the previous day. She carried a thermos and a brown bag that seemed out of place in her manicured hands. "Good morning," she said, her tone cautious but friendly. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "You're back. I told you I want to understand your life," she said, setting the bag on the counter. "I brought coffee and sandwiches. Figured you might not have time for breakfast." Lucas stared at the bag, his suspicion mingling with gratitude. "Thanks, I guess." Amelia smiled, relieved that he hadn't sent her away. She stayed by the cart, watching as he interacted with customers. Each sale was accompanied by a kind word or a light-hearted joke, and she found herself admiring his natural charm. "You're good at this," she said, as the crowd thinned. Lucas shrugged. "It's just cakes. People like them, that's all." "It's more than that," she insisted. "You have a way of making people feel seen. That's a rare gift." Lucas glanced at her, unsure how to respond. He wasn't used to praise, especially not from someone like her. By midday, Amelia had settled onto a nearby bench, observing quietly as Lucas worked. She couldn't help but notice the respect he garnered from his customers. Even in a simple apron, he commanded a presence that reminded her of someone, herself. When the lunch rush died down, she stood and approached the cart again. "Lucas," she began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about not needing me." He looked up, his expression guarded. "I want to earn your trust," she continued. "Not just as your mother, but as someone who believes in you. I meant it when I said we could partner. Your cakes deserve a bigger audience." Lucas sighed, leaning against the cart. "You make it sound so easy. But I've been doing this for years, and no one's ever offered me a chance like that." "Sometimes it just takes one person to believe in you," Amelia said gently. He studied her, his defenses softening slightly. "And if it doesn't work? If I fail? Then you try again," she said. "That's what life is about. Failure isn't the end. It's a step towards something better." Over the next few weeks, their relationship began to shift. Amelia continued to visit his stall, sometimes staying for hours to help or simply observe. At first, Lucas found her presence intrusive, but over time he started to appreciate her insights. She had an eye for presentation, suggesting small changes that drew more customers. One afternoon, she arrived with a sleek portfolio. "I had some ideas," she said, handing it to Lucas. He opened it cautiously, his eyes widening as he flipped through the pages. Detailed sketches of a storefront, branding concepts, and even marketing strategies filled the portfolio. "This is a lot," he admitted, overwhelmed. "I know," Amelia said quickly, "but these are just ideas. You don't have to agree to anything. I just wanted to show you what's possible." Lucas closed the portfolio, his thoughts a whirlwind. The dream she presented was enticing, but it felt too big, too far from his reality. "I need time to think," he said. "Take all the time you need," Amelia replied, her tone understanding. That evening, Lucas found himself in his tiny apartment, the portfolio spread out on the table. He couldn't stop staring at the sketches of the storefront, a warm, inviting space filled with the aroma of fresh cakes. He thought about his grandmother and her unwavering belief in his talent. Chrysanthemums for strength, she had always said. Maybe it was time to find that strength within himself. The next morning, Lucas arrived at his stall with a new sense of purpose. He greeted Amelia with a tentative smile. "I've been thinking about your offer," he said. Her eyes lit up. "And? I'm willing to try," he said, his voice steady. "But on one condition. This has to be about the cakes, not about me being your son." Amelia nodded, understanding his need for boundaries. "Deal." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Amelia introduced Lucas to her network, connecting him with suppliers, designers, and even a renowned chef who offered to mentor him. Lucas threw himself into the process, learning everything he could about running a business. Despite the challenges, he found himself thriving. The storefront took shape, its cozy interior reflecting his personality and the essence of his cakes. He named it Petals and Pastries, a nod to his signature ingredient. Amelia watched from the sidelines, careful not to overstep. She wanted Lucas to succeed on his own terms, but she couldn't help feeling proud of how far he had come. The grand opening of Petals and Pastries was a resounding success. The cafe buzzed with customers, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Lucas moved effortlessly between tables, his smile genuine as he served cakes and thanked people for their support. Amelia sat in a corner, her heart swelling with pride. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. Lucas was no longer the boy she had lost. He was a man forging his own path. As the evening wound down, Lucas joined her at the table, exhaustion etched on his face. "Not bad for a first day," he said with a grin. "Not bad at all," Amelia agreed, raising her glass of sparkling water. "To new beginnings." Lucas hesitated before clinking his glass against hers. "To new beginnings." That night, as Lucas locked up the cafe, he found himself thinking about Amelia. She had brought chaos into his life, but she had also given him something he hadn't realized he was missing, a sense of belonging. When he arrived home, he pulled out the letter she had given him and read it again. The words felt different this time, less like a confession and more like a promise. Across town, Amelia sat in her penthouse, staring at a photo of her younger self. She had made mistakes, more than she could count, but finding Lucas had been her greatest redemption. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to hope. The weeks that followed the opening of Petals and Pastries were a whirlwind for Lucas. Every morning, he opened the cafe's doors to a growing stream of customers, each one eager to try his signature cakes. His hands worked tirelessly, kneading dough, folding petals, and perfecting glazes, but it was a labor of love. Still, something gnawed at him, a quiet question that lingered in the corners of his mind. What did Amelia's reappearance really mean for his life? They had begun to form a tentative bond, but the line between mother and business partner was blurry. He had built this cafe with her help, but it was his talent that had made it thrive. Would their relationship ever be about more than what she could give him? Or worse, was this just a way for her to ease her guilt? One evening, after a particularly busy day, Lucas lingered at the cafe long after closing. The last rays of sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the tables. He was lost in thought when the chime of the door startled him. "Sorry, we're closed," he called without looking up. "I know," came Amelia's voice. Lucas turned to see her standing in the doorway, a hesitant smile on her face. She was carrying a small box wrapped in elegant paper. "What's this?" he asked as she approached. "A gift," she said, placing the box on the counter. "You've been working so hard I thought you deserved something special." Lucas eyed the box warily before untying the ribbon. Inside was a beautifully crafted chef's knife, its handle engraved with chrysanthemums. "It's custom-made," Amelia explained. "For you." Lucas ran his fingers over the engraving, his chest tightening. "Thank you," he said softly. Amelia hesitated, then pulled up a stool. "I didn't just come to give you the knife," she admitted. "I wanted to talk." Lucas leaned against the counter, folding his arms. "About what?" "About us," she said, her tone serious. "I know things between us are complicated, and I know I can't erase the past. But I want to be part of your future, Lucas. Not just as your business partner, but as your mother." Her words hung in the air, and Lucas felt a familiar tug of resistance. "It's not that simple," he said after a moment. "I know," Amelia said, "but I'm willing to put in the work. I want to know you, not just the man you are now, but the boy I never got to raise." Lucas looked away, his emotions swirling. He wanted to believe her, but trust didn't come easily to him. "You can't just show up and expect everything to be okay," he said quietly. "I don't expect that," she said, her voice steady. "I just want a chance." The days turned into weeks, and Lucas found himself letting his guard down, bit by bit. Amelia began to visit the cafe regularly, not as a businesswoman, but as a mother trying to rebuild a relationship. She helped him with small tasks, listened to his stories, and even joined him in the kitchen to learn how to bake. At first, her attempts were clumsy. She burned a batch of cookies and nearly dropped a tray of cupcakes, but Lucas couldn't deny the sincerity of her efforts. One evening, as they worked side by side, Amelia paused to wipe flour from her hands. "Your grandmother would be so proud of you," she said, her voice filled with emotion. Lucas froze, the mention of his grandmother stirring a deep ache in his chest. "You knew her?" Amelia nodded. "I met her once, when I brought you to her. She promised to take care of you, and I knew you'd be safe with her." Lucas's throat tightened. "She never talked about you." "Not really. I asked her not to," Amelia admitted. "I thought it would be easier for you if you didn't know." Lucas shook his head, his voice laced with frustration. "You keep saying that what was easier for me, but did you ever stop to think about what I wanted?" Amelia's eyes filled with tears. "I thought about it every day," she said softly. "I just didn't know how to fix it." For a long moment they stood in silence, the weight of their shared pain hanging between them. Then, quietly, Lucas said, "She always told me I was stronger than I thought. Maybe she was right." The breakthrough came on a rainy Saturday evening. Lucas had closed the cafe early, and Amelia had invited him to dinner at her penthouse, a bold move considering he had never seen her world beyond their shared moments at the cafe. When Lucas stepped into her home, he was struck by its grandeur. The walls were lined with art, the furniture sleek and modern. It was the kind of space he had only seen in magazines, yet it felt strangely empty. "Make yourself at home," Amelia said, guiding him to the dining table. The meal was simple but delicious. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and a crisp salad. Amelia had cooked it herself, a fact that surprised Lucas. "I wanted to share something personal with you," she said as they ate. "I know I've made mistakes, but I'm trying to show you that I'm more than the CEO you see in the papers." Lucas nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You don't have to try so hard, you know. I just need time to figure this out." Amelia smiled, relief washing over her. "I'll give you all the time you need." As the weeks turned into months, Lucas and Amelia found a rhythm. Their bond grew stronger, though it was far from perfect. They argued at times over decisions for the cafe, over memories of the past, but each argument brought them closer, forcing them to confront the complexities of their relationship. One afternoon, as they sat in the cafe after closing, Amelia pulled out a faded photograph. It was a picture of Lucas as a baby, wrapped in the same blanket she had shown him in the park. "I've kept this with me all these years," she said, sliding it across the table. Lucas studied the photo, his heart swelling with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "I don't remember any of this," he admitted. "That's okay," Amelia said gently. "We can make new memories." The turning point came during the cafe's first holiday season. Lucas had decided to host a community event, offering free cakes to anyone who needed a warm meal. The idea had been his grandmother's dream, to use food as a way to bring people together. Amelia threw herself into the preparations, helping Lucas organize volunteers and decorate the cafe. On the night of the event, the space was filled with laughter, music, and the scent of freshly baked goods. As Lucas watched families share slices of cake and children marvel at the twinkling lights, he felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. Amelia stood beside him, her eyes shining with pride. "You've created something incredible," she said. Lucas turned to her, a small smile playing on his lips. "We created it," he corrected. By the time the new year arrived, Lucas and Amelia had reached an unspoken understanding. They would never have the traditional mother-son relationship, but what they had was real and worth fighting for. One evening, as they locked up the cafe together, Lucas surprised Amelia by saying, "I've been thinking about adding a new flavor to the menu." "Oh?" she asked, intrigued. "Something with lavender," he said. "It's calming, and I think people need that." Amelia smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "I think it's a wonderful idea." In the months that followed, Petals and Pastries became a beloved fixture in the community, known not just for its cakes, but for the warmth and kindness it exuded. Lucas thrived, his confidence growing with each passing day. And while their journey had been anything but easy, he and Amelia had found something neither had expected, a love worth finding.